Thank you, Michelle. And it's just great to be a part of the Ashoka U Exchange this year and welcome everyone. It's so great to be with such a great group of co-presenters here today. And I do have to say, I really do miss the exchange, being together. I think this one thing the pandemic has shown is like the value of face-to-face. And so I say that in appreciation for Ashoka U's leadership in getting us here in a virtual space, and saying I can't wait until we're back together again. I'm going to start off this session by sharing a little bit about Ashoka. Our topic here today is how do we build changemakers? And of course, Ashoka is known primarily for its work in the field of social entrepreneurship. And so what Ashoka has done is to identify systems changing social entrepreneurs around the world, people with practical solutions to real problems, and people who have significantly moved the needle. It's a very high bar to become an Ashoka Fellow. It's a very selective group. And it's primarily an international group. And of course, many of you know about the Ashoka Fellows. And I will say that myself, I have been deeply inspired for many, many years by the Ashoka Fellows. And that's what drew me into this world of social innovation and social impact. And I'll just say, if you've never read David Bornstein's book, How to Change the World, I highly recommend that you do, because it is the account of the story of Ashoka and the formation of social entrepreneurs as a field, and really where Ashoka U has brought that to everyone. But something happened, and you can go to the next slide, Nick. That one of the things about Ashoka's vision about social entrepreneurs is that what defines social entrepreneurship for Ashoka is a vision of systemic change. And so you probably all know the quote by Martin Luther King, who said, "True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." Or as Bill Drayton has famously said, you know, we're not content to give a fish or teach to fish, but to revolutionize the fishing industry. And so this idea of systems change is about that, you know, 90% of fellows have seen their work replicated by outside groups, and 93% of the fellows have influenced public policy, and 97% of the fellows report shifting social mindsets and creating social change, altering markets. And so this is what we mean by systems change. But there's something even beyond this, and that's the next slide, which is at a certain point in all the pattern analysis of that we were able to do at Ashoka, looking at the fellows, was that we begin to see these patterns in the fellows themselves, because one of the funders of Ashoka, Pierre Omidyar, had come to Bill and said, hey, Bill Drayton, the founder, he said, if you had 10,000 fellows, it wouldn't be enough. And so Ashoka made this pivot from just thinking about, you know, identifying leading social entrepreneurs, providing them with support, knitting them together into community, to shifting to an everyone a changemaker world where everyone is participating in this. And so what we saw was that the changemakers embodied a certain kinds of skills, cognitive empathy, that they started their changemaking journeys at early ages, and that they began exercising their changemaking muscles in their teens, and they began to participate in fluid leadership and working in collaboration and practicing this sort of what we think of as creative and complex problem solving. And so finally here, I'll just say that Ashoka's vision is everyone a changemaker. And the question before us all now really is, who gets the opportunity to learn and develop and cultivate their change-making skills, and who doesn't? Because there are many people who have access to the resources, social, emotional, physical, financial, the privilege, if you will, to participate in becoming a change maker. And there are lots of people who are left out. And we think of this as another kind of inequality that's out there. And so our work and our vision and our passion is to see that everyone is a change maker, and especially those who are farthest from that opportunity. And that's what we're really here to talk about today, are strategies and tactics to build change makers. So with that, I am turning it over to Nick, I believe. And
That's
so
great.
thank you all for your attention.
Oops. Thank you, Paul, for that. So my name is Nick Bodecker. I'm a youth activation specialist with Ashoka, which means that I work on the Ashoka Youth Years team to try to help spark and support young change makers. And I generally work with students that are 18 or under, so working with a lot of the high school age students. But just wanted to reiterate a little of what Paul said. One thing that really drew me to Ashoka was the vision that we saw on that last side of, a world where not just some people have these critical skills of change making, but that a vision of where every young person identifies as a change maker. And for me, before joining Ashoka, I was doing a lot of teaching around social entrepreneurship for young people and around helping young people to start these change maker journeys, but joined Ashoka because I recognized the importance of this to complementing the modern education as it is, and wanting to see this happen at scale, not just in a handful of schools that have identified this as an important part of their young students' journey. Excuse me. So, as we're framing the every young child identifying as a young change maker, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. And, now more than ever, we're seeing how important these are. When we talk about the importance of changemaker education, we talk about two things at Ashoka. So one is the rise of problems that are resulting from an accelerated rate of change and an accelerated rate of interconnectivity around the world that need to be addressed. And the fact that we need young people to help us to address those problems, both globally and locally. And we need society to recognize the importance of young people in solving these problems. The second layer of that is that, in preparing for the future and the workforce of the future, the skills that young people are cultivating through becoming change makers, through starting social impact projects, are absolutely necessary for them to thrive in a world that, as in the slide, we see, many of the jobs people will have in the future don't exist yet, using technology that haven't been invented to find solutions for problems that have not yet emerged. And we think that change making is, just like I said, a critical part of a young person's education to be able to develop this set of entrepreneurial skills in order to thrive with whatever comes at them. And as we've seen in the past couple months, the rate of change is certainly accelerating. And, just like we have been analyzing the Ashoka Fellows who are in our network, we've also been doing a good deal of study looking at what are some of the patterns of both the Fellows and the Ashoka Young Changemakers that we work with. And we put those together into a framework of 4 elements or qualities of changemaking that we want every young person to get the chance to develop. And we think of these, a lot of times we describe them as muscles that need to be exercised and practiced from a young age, so that we can both prepare young people for the future and address the problems of today. So the 4 kind of categories of skills that we're talking about when we're talking about raising and educating young change makers are empathy, and in particular, cognitive empathy starting from a young age. And that is empathy that moves people to take action on the perspectives that they're seeing in others and to address problems. We, in the programs that we run and that we partner with schools to build, we talk a lot about new leadership, which is acknowledging the importance of setting the vision and the traditional leadership styles and tactics, but also adding on the idea that new leadership is about empowering other people to become leaders. In connection to that, we talk a lot about collaborative teamwork, and that's preparing young people to work and thrive in less structured, less hierarchical settings where they're going to be with what we call on team of teams. So people coming together from not just different parts of one organization, but different organizations, different parts of society, different countries around the world, coming together in these fluid teams to address issues that are coming up over and over again over the course of their careers. And then our final category that we talk about of qualities of change makers are what we call change-making skills. We often refer to these as creative problem solving, but it is the set of skills, very much entrepreneurial skills that allow young people to move from having an idea or of how to address a problem to really bringing that into the world in a real way and making it tangible and forming a team and growing their whatever idea they have to address different issues. Another tool or framework that we often use at Ashoka, which has been really useful for our partners who are bringing this into their classrooms, is the Changemaker journey. And after this slide, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to Viviana and some of the young changemakers we have on this call to talk a little bit more about Changemaker journeys and specific tactics and strategies that they're using to bring all of these ideas into the classroom. But just wanted to review this first, that we developed this through studying the pathways of Ashoka Fellows and young changemakers, but the Changemaker journey is an incredibly useful tool and framework to help everyone, young people and the teachers who are trying to support these journeys, to identify where they are in terms of building these changemaker muscles. So from the patterns that we've seen and how people get started in social entrepreneurship and changemaking, it really starts with that first spark. And that's that cognitive empathy, that experience that really moves someone to take action. And along with that is also a self-discovery, right? Understanding what motivates us individually, what are we passionate about, what skills and talents do we want to bring into this change-making journey, and also who are some of the inspiring role models that we can look to that are modeling this behavior for us, both maybe out of our peer group and within our peer group. The second part of that journey is these first actions, which are often trial and error, very experimental, but going from having an idea to putting it into action. And it's very often not the idea that these change makers end up scaling up or doing at a large scale, but it's the first tries and how important are those in these little loop here we see are the different iterations of those first ideas and those pivots that people are making. We often see next, once some traction starts to happen, some appreciation that's helping to further along this changemaker journey. So some acknowledgements of all the sometimes messy process of those first actions when things do start to stick and the impact starts to be created. The young changemaker or changemaker of any age starts to receive some sort of appreciation from families, schools, societies, and it helps to kind of propel them and take that work to the next level. To step 4, which was where we see people kind of really engaging in change making in a more intentional, planned way. So designing that kind of action plan, bringing more people in, building a team, starting to do fundraising and generating revenue, which of course also involves its own levels of iteration we see in that loop between 4 and 5. Before people kind of move into something we sometimes call a changemaker citizen, but it's acknowledging that changemaking is not a one-time act, nor is it meant to be, and that the tools and skills and mindsets that are gained through this changemaker journey become a pattern of behavior throughout that person's life. Which is, something that we've learned from looking at the Ashoka Fellows, that the majority of them did start when they were young on this change-making journey, and, often from very humble, simple steps at the beginning, but over time, through flexing these muscles, really grew into something that are changing societies around the world. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Viviana, who's going to talk a little bit more about specific tactics that she's been using as she's been training educators to bring changemaking into their classrooms. Thank you.
I'm Viviana Alexandrovich, and I'm a professor at the University of San Diego. I teach in the teacher preparation program and I've been with Ashoka for about 5 years. We're pioneering an initiative to integrate changemaking into our teacher education programs. So following up to what Nick said, this is what we're trying to do in the School of Ed, is to prepare teachers to see that they could somehow replicate and ignite the passion in students to become leaders and to be change makers and to collaborate with their classmates to do things that for the common good. So I figured that I would just give you some specific concrete ideas that we have implemented for building empathy, leadership, collaboration, problem solving skills. One of the things that not only teachers can do with children is to read about historical figures, or actually youth. That has more impact on children than just reading on historical figures that they can relate to, but just regular kids that have made these changes. And the changes, we say, don't have to be at the global level. They can be either in their home, in the neighborhood, community, city, state, so at different levels. The other thing that we use a lot is videos about environmental or social issues, and ask them to critically think about how they could help. So we have initiated or supported kids to do campaigns where they watch these videos and they work in teams too, or with their neighbors or with their siblings in this case, to come up with ideas on how they can help with the problem. Again, I think that it's important that we help parents or families or uncles to see that it's not just for one, in what particular context that we help kids to think of themselves as change makers. But at home, they spend a lot of time at home. And that's what I think Nick or Paul were referring to as the ecosystem. We can't just teach this in school if parents are not on board at home. So we have really now putting more work into how we're gonna help parents to see that in everyday things that they do at home, they can start teaching their kids about empathy towards others and empathy towards the environment. So for example, I visited a school, it was a changemaker designated school, and I approached a child, it was like the second grader. And I asked him, so how are you a change maker? And he told me, he said, you know, I went home and I told my family that from now on, we need to start recycling the plastic bottles that we use. And we use a lot of plastic bottles. So he was very concrete about that. And he knew exactly what a change maker was and how it applies to himself and his family. And then give them opportunities for leadership by asking solutions for parenting problems, putting them in the shoes of parents and say, hey, how can I get you to clean your bedroom? How would you do it if you were a parent? So those little opportunities, everyday opportunities, are very important. There is a site that I want to show, Nick, if you can get us so I can share my screen. For these times right now, how kids can get involved in helping. So there is this website called Do Good From Home, and I'm gonna post the URL on the chat so you have it. But they provide all kind of ideas for kids to help now during these times virtually. Okay, so you're gonna see all the ideas there. Another one that I wanted to mention to you is, and this is out of a Design for Change website. It's a it's an organization that help teachers and kids to create projects. And then this one is from 35 service projects for kids. I'm going to also post it, but it gives you all kind of ideas on how you can engage the children in your life and the youth in your life in different projects. So one of the things that I wanted to say, Nick, you can go back to the next one. It is important to, you can go to the next slide. Oh, let me stop. Are you seeing the slide, everyone? Yes, okay. So the idea is that we want to go back to that model that Nick presented, the framework, where we're trying to replicate in a way that spark, that stage where we spark students to think, what can I do? How can I help? What solutions can I find? So if we are not able to provide them with the opportunity to experience in the moment, for example, taking them to senior citizens' homes, or when we walk by homeless people, just talk about it and talk about how we can help with the situation. Another way is to present them with pictures, beside videos with pictures, and ask critical questions like that forces children to put themselves in the shoes of others. So if I ask you the question, what does he see? What do you think he sees? Can someone tell me? Just an answer, different answers. What would you say? That
no hope.
Okay. What else?
No eye contact.
Okay.
A willingness to change.
Okay. So let's go to the second one. What does he feel?
Someone on the chat said depression.
Thank you. I need to look at the chat. He's tried but failed. No opportunities, hopeless. What else?
Embarrassed.
Embarrassed. And what does he worry about? Cold.
Dying.
Dying. Food, his health. So as you can see, by presenting children, not just with pictures, but every time you are faced in life with a situation or with problems, get them thinking about these three questions. Get them thinking about what would he do or she do if they were in the shoes of these people, just to get them in the shoes of others first, and to help solve the problem. So these are just very few concrete ideas. I'm going to put the two websites there. If you want more resources, please send me a message privately. I have tons of resources. I'm soon going to launch a very important organization that is going to have plenty of resources for everyone to work with youth. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Viviana. Let's stay right there on that slide, actually. So in the spirit of learning more about how we can enable changemaker journeys, I want to introduce two very special guests that we have today. So we have Manat and Christian who are joining us, who are both part of the Ashoka Young Changemakers program. And this is a program that Ashoka puts on to support young people, not only on the changemaking journey that they're already on, but to bring them into the movement of the Everyone a Changemaker world. So that is to help them also to co-lead this movement with us of trying to empower other young people to begin their own changemaker journeys in a major way around the country and around the world. So I'm going to invite one of them to start. Maybe Christian, you could start for us. If you could just introduce yourself and briefly talk about what the project that you've been working on is. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question after, but we'll have you introduce yourself and your project, and then we'll go to Manat.
Definitely. Yeah, so my name's Christian Dixon. I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado, and I'm a first-year student at Colorado State University. I'm studying political science and Spanish and natural resource economics. I just added in recently. And he mentioned that I'm a part of the Ashoka Young Changemaker program, and the way I see it is me and Manat and the rest of the cohort and my peers around me are committed to this. We're committed to finding solutions to the number of problems out there, to outrunning the problems with solutions. And for me, that was in my high school. My role model, you could say, was there were two people that shaped my journey. The first one was my principal, and it was just during an average common lunch day where picture all of the students, the buzz of activity in the main hallways. And I looked over my shoulder and I saw him walking down the hallway, and he's 6'7", so it's pretty hard to miss him. And he had a broom and he had a dustpan, and he was just cleaning up trash in the hallway. And it was kind of that moment where everything slowed down for me, everything. And I was just watching him, and I realized in that moment that for someone like our principal, who I'm sure has thousands of tasks, emails, staff meetings, trainings, and yet he's in the hallway and he's cleaning up trash. And then later that year, I was sitting out on the bench on the far side of our school, and a gentleman walked by and had a big beard, and I recognized him. He was wearing our school, or he was wearing his worker's uniform, and I asked him what his name was, and he said Robert. And I asked him a question that has forever shaped my journey. I said, "What's your story?" And he told me about his kids, and he told me about his 8-year career as a custodial worker at our high school. And he shared about how he loves students, and how when he walks down the hallways, he can just feel the energy and the passion, and he gets the change making side. And he told me about his little boy, Julian, who's 4 years old now, and he just lights up when he's talking about him. And it was kind of one of those moments where in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about all the challenges we have, about the trash problem, which I'm sure many campuses experience. That mindset of somebody else will pick that up. That's not my problem, right? Somebody's probably responsible for that. To challenge that mindset, and then also to support the custodial staff who had turnover year after year. They were under capacity. They didn't feel like they were valued. They felt like this gentleman in the photo here, where they were just overlooked. And we had trays that were stacked up on trash cans. They didn't belong there. They belonged in the cafeteria. And so we had forks and food falling over after common lunch, and the custodians had to clean that all up. And we had 70 plus classrooms. We had an enormous school. And I just stopped and I said, what would that look like if we could get our entire student body to shift our framework? If we could shift our framework and say, the trash on the ground, that's our responsibility. That's our opportunity to make a change. The trays, to encourage people to take them back. And if you go to Fort Collins High School today, we had a marketing campaign where I put my photo on top of the trash cans with another student, and it said, trays go back in the cafeteria. And the irony here is that so many trays were stacked on top of my face that it ended up wearing down, but we still pushed through. And it was kind of that moment where we wanted to start an initiative to say that we support the custodial staff, that we recognize the challenges, but we're committed to finding a solution. And so 200 students, we got together and we marched down the main hallway with a banner and cake and t-shirts, and we said, thank you. And we had students sign it, and we challenged the student body. We said, we recognize these challenges. We know that it's not a popular subject to be cleaning up trash, we're here to learn, we're here to spend time with friends, but what would that look like if we could shift our framework and show support in that way? And so we created an initiative called the Custodian Service Initiative. And Nick, feel free if you have any follow-up questions on that part of it. It's still going. I shared it with our school board. I shared it with at my university, where I want to start it at Colorado State University. And it's this idea of recognizing that custodial workers see it all. They see the kid who eats alone at lunch. They see the busyness after school. They see the quiet hours. They see it late at night. They see teachers working overtime. They see it all. And so my question to the school board member was, well, if you want to see the culture of our schools, talk to the custodial worker, because they see it all. And so my program is committed to that, to sharing their stories, to supporting them, and to changing frameworks in schools in any way we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Christian. I'm going to pause you there, and we're going to come back and ask you some follow-up questions about
Definitely.
getting started on that journey. But let me turn it over to Manat, who's out in the Bay Area. Manat, could you tell us a little bit about your initiative?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Manat Kaur. I am 16. And for me, I'm a huge nerd. I really love math and science. But when I got to middle school, I no longer had the confidence to pursue that interest. And suddenly liking math and science seemed really uncool because as the girls around me changed to focus on their appearances and boys, I felt really out of place. And what I realized is that as young girls, we often don't have access to women leaders who can share their stories with us and tell us it's okay to not be like the stereotypical girl, but that you should just be confident and pursue your passion. So I started an organization called Object 5 years ago when I was in 7th grade, and we promote confidence in young girls with monthly workshops. So we have women speakers who come and share their stories, lead an activity, and then I really like to eat, so there's time to mingle with the speaker over food as well. And in the last 3 years, we've had about 2,500 girls attend in the US, India, and in Palestine as well.
Amazing. Thank you. So let me ask the follow-up question with you first, Manat. Who or what do you think was the enabling factor that maybe didn't get you to the end of your journey, but like we've talked about before, to help you to take those first critical, sometimes messy, disorganized steps of that change-making journey as you got started?
Definitely. I think I often felt alone. I thought I was the only girl struggling with confidence, but when I opened up to my friends and I realized that they also felt this way, I understood that I had to do something to make a change because it was no longer just my problem. It was a broader, more universal issue. And my friends, my parents, I'd say my community really supported me throughout that journey as I navigated those first steps, because it can often be so difficult when you don't know what to do and you're like, I'm promoting workshops to random people, I'm giving out flyers in libraries and parks. So it was all so scary for me, but to have a strong support network to come back to at the end of the day made it all worthwhile.
Yes, amazing. Anything you want to add about that emotional journey at the beginning? I know it's something that in my classrooms I try to emphasize and try to normalize that fear and anxiety as a normal part of any changemaker journey. And I think for me, at least, that's something that the people that are helping to teach social entrepreneurship or change making can really, really help the people that they're working with by kind of guiding them through that part of it as well. Has that been your experience?
Definitely. Especially I was doing this all as a 13-year-old, so I was way outside my comfort zone, and sometimes I just felt lost. I didn't know what should I do next, and is this even going to be successful? I remember the night before our first workshop, I couldn't sleep because I was like, no one's going to come, and it's just going to be me and the speaker in a room alone, and it's just going to be a failure. But I learned to work through that, and I also built my confidence and realized at the same time that everything can't be perfect, so I should give it my best, and if something goes wrong, then I need to embrace that and use it to learn.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Christian, let me turn it back to you. Kind of similar question. Who were the people or what were the enabling factors that really helped you out at the beginning of your change-making journey, whenever that was, maybe with the custodial initiative or in the projects or you've done before that?
Yeah. Well, I first want to just mention my parents have been such a support all the way through. My mom homeschooled me all the way up until high school. And so it was always just kind of this mindset of I can take that on, and that is our responsibility. And I would say the social responsibility that she fostered in our house is just kind of what I took into the world and what I took into high school and into my conversations. So I wouldn't be here today without them. And I'd also say my club advisor, I would say that she supported the vision and she helped us to get there, right? Because we developed this this idea of, well, so how can we achieve this? How can we celebrate our custodial workers? And ultimately, she was the one where she was working behind the scenes to set us up for success. And I think that's such a crucial role where for young change makers like myself, we had the team, we had the people, we had the numbers, we had the vision. As far as administering it and setting it up for success, she planted seeds all across campus. She was telling people, hey, have you heard about this initiative? Have you talked to the student government? Have you talked to the student newspaper? And so it was all of these avenues that she was keeping alive. And as an advisor, I'm so grateful for that, because ultimately that just got the word out of what we were trying to accomplish. And it gave us a bigger platform to share our vision. So those are kind of two main supporters that have really helped me.
Yeah, wonderful. Anything that those supporters did to help you with kind of that emotional side of beginning the Changemaker journey, to help with some of that anxiety or lack of confidence, or just helping you to really step into or out of your comfort zone, I guess, as it is?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember every year we have, or not every year, every week, every Friday at our high school, they get all the students, the a cappella lines up on the stairs and they sing our alma mater. And so 500, 600 students just kind of gather around every Friday at the same time. And we got the chance to share our message in front of all of them. And I just remember I was walking up the stairs and I was looking out and just all around, just students. And it was that fear in the back of my mind where I'm like, man, I don't want to mess this up. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't get my message across? And then I looked straight ahead and I saw the custodial staff. They came in early that day. They were wearing our t-shirts that we designed for them. They were lined up. And I just remember making eye contact with them. And it was like, that was all that was there. I didn't see any of the students. I just saw them, and I saw the purpose behind our initiative, and ultimately I think that's what brought us the success. And the framework shift was we were focused on the why. They were right there, that we knew who we were celebrating. We knew why we were doing it. And so ultimately that's all that mattered, was that we had them there present. And so I'm incredibly grateful for their stories and the way they've inspired me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to you both for sharing your stories and kind of the beginning origins of that Changemaker journey. I think those are so useful to share as storytelling along with the success that you've all had in your journey. I want to kind of turn to the second part of this session now, where we want to hear more from the participants that are on this call, who also have their own stories and Changemaker journey that they're on. So if you'll give me a second, I'm just going to share my screen again, and we're going to put you into breakout groups in a few minutes. I'm going to tell you what I'd like you to talk about. So what I'd like to do now is give everyone a few moments, and I'd like you to reflect. And this is something that we're going to bring into the breakout groups in a minute. But the question of, what was your most formative change-making moment? And this could be something that happened to you when you were in school, or as an adult in your career, but just trying to identify any moment where you feel like you were able to creatively address an issue that you saw and you really felt empowered to make a change. And I would encourage you, don't overthink it. It's something that you may be sharing just with one other person, but we won't be randomly calling on you to share it with the group. So take a moment to think about that. And then I'm going to ask everyone to get in a group and talk about a question that is related to that, which is, I'd love the focus of your conversation, and feel free to introduce yourself very briefly to your partner as you get randomly paired up. But I'm going to ask you to go in groups of two, briefly introduce yourself to the person. Feel free to mention that change-making moment, but I was hoping that people would spend most of the 6 minutes I'm going to give you talking about kind of who supported you as you started that journey, and what were some of the enabling factors like Christian and Manat talked about. Sounds good? Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was a good conversation. Would love to just give a couple of minutes as we We have about 10 minutes left. We'll finish on time, but would love to hear if anything interesting came out of that discussion around the people or other factors that might have enabled you during whatever moment where you felt like you stepped into your own change-making power. Would anyone like to share?
Hi, everyone. Imani Jerome. I'm the Director of Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Florida International University. Arun, we didn't have enough time to talk to get everyone's messaging, but I did want one of my colleagues, Santiago, who was mentioning before he got unfortunately cut off, about how we don't often take the time when we lead change initiatives to think about our own reflection and think a little bit about what we're doing, since part of the reason I'm sure we're all here is because we're the types of people that care about other people, that we always want to work for others, but we often forget our own needs and own interests. And that connects to mine, where I shared with the group that growing up, I don't think I had a changemaker moment. And in fact, I was envious of other people who seemed to be able to do changemaker things. I was a relatively quiet kid. I didn't think that I could really do those kinds of things. So when I became an adult, I got interested in this type of work because I want to enable other people to have those moments that I didn't feel like I had when I was a younger person in school. So for me, my changemaker moment was in fact someone else's maker moment that I kind of helped enable at my university, and it was really nice.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to respond or share their own?
I would like to respond to Jerome. Jerome, you said Jerome or you said Money? You go by Money or by Jerome?
I go by Eth because they're both first names. So Imani or Jerome would be fine.
You know, I think that most children are in your situation. Most children don't have enough opportunities or don't see that they are the one. They don't see themselves as leaders. They don't see themselves as the one that are going to be able to create change. It's not something that socially, they are aware of. So that is the point of all this. The point is that to make it accessible to all children, to emulate what children that had that privilege in their families or in their neighborhood or in their environment, to try to give those, and the majority of kids, the opportunities that those children had. And so this is the work. This is what we're trying to do. So it was a perfect example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we typically think of, or a lot of times, leadership in middle school or high school, we think of maybe student government or student council or something like that. It's really limited to a very small amount of students that are able to have that opportunity. And the opportunity itself isn't necessarily the kind of deep leadership, self-reflective, action-oriented process that I think change-making in its essence really is, as well as being much more accessible than, to just 1% of the student body, for example.
If I would just kind of follow up on that, not to hog any conversation, but in your presentation, Nick, I think what was particularly interesting to me as someone who is in charge of my strategy at my university, and we're still kind of formulating what that strategy looks like at the university, it's the Spark area where we're finding we can give students a lot of tools and resources. My particular office at my university is primarily focused on entrepreneurship, social innovation. But we also have that other element of change making where a person may not create a business at all. And we have to be comfortable that that's not necessarily what you have to do to be a change maker. And so we find people that come to us because they're like, we want to start a business that does blank. We're more interested in, how do we get you interested in caring about someone else? Like, how do we, we're getting students so much further along that line who never actually acknowledge their spark. They think they have the idea of what they want to do. They believe they have the business to save the world, and they come to us to help grow that. But I'm finding that we miss a lot of students who have not yet built any sense of empathy. Kind of have to go backwards. And that's something that I'm noticing with some of our students. I'd be curious if anybody else have had similar experiences.
Yeah, and just to touch on one other theme that I think you mentioned we also emphasize the importance of the other entries of the changemaker journey, like you mentioned, right? It's not every student is going to be starting their own nonprofit or even their own project. And the role of that first follower or supporting team is essential for the ecosystem of changemaking, in schools and outside of schools, along with the role of sparking other changemakers, whether it's in your family or in your peer group. And, a lot of times what we'll see is that the young people who don't necessarily have an idea that they feel very passionate about, they'll get very passionate about enabling other people to find their passion. And through that, they'll kind of start either a changemaker journey that focuses on just that, on getting young people together to help enable more changemaker journeys, or they'll end up through that process of helping other people out, joining teams and getting experiences that leads them to something that they find really meaningful. For me, whether you're on your changemaking journey at whatever age, or you're teaching it, or entrepreneurship in general, I find it's so helpful as a base to kind of start from that individual experience and kind of moving from that to teaching it out into the world. So one of the things I would like to do with this group before we exit is to really think about the act of sparking another changemaker journey and really trying to make it individual, and it'll try to allow us to kind of practice it at an individual level as we take it into our peer groups or classrooms or wherever it is we happen to have that outlet. But if you give me a second, I'm going to just do one last screen share with you all. So we've talked about what our maybe a formative changemaking moment for us was. And we talked about someone that maybe supported us on that changemaker journey. And the challenge that many of us, on a day-to-day basis are thinking about are how do we become that support person or that person that sparks a changemaker journey in someone else. So as we end today, I wanted to challenge you all to think about an individual young person in your life. And that could be, a child, it could be a niece or a nephew, it could be a student, it could be a friend of your own peer group. And I'd love for you to first think about where do you think they are on that changemaker journey, and what maybe do they need next? Are they someone that maybe needs that spark to start to feel empowered and to start to take those first actions? Are they someone that's trying something that needs maybe that acknowledgement or appreciation of their actions to move to the next level? Do they need a role model? If they are already further along, how can we help them with those next iterations, or to go to whatever it is to go to that next level? But I'd love for you to just, and I won't ask you to share this with anyone, but maybe just center your thoughts for the next few minutes on one individual. For me, it's going to be, I have a nephew out in San Francisco. His name is Drake, and he's in 4th grade. He's 10 years old. And he's been someone that I've been trying to work with lately on his own very early changemaker journey, but it's really been so helpful in helping me think through kind of that individual work and how to take all of those lessons learned through that individual work and bring it into a lot of the teaching I'm doing. So our final question of the day, I'm going to open it up to the group, and I'd love for people to contribute on the chat, is what do you think are some of the first steps that you could do to either spark or support, or support whatever, wherever that person is on their own change-making journey? And would love to invite anyone to comment on how they think they could get that kicked off.
We had a response on the chat.
Wonderful, thank you, Manat. Make them feel heard and help them to brainstorm, absolutely. A lot of this for me is also about that, those initial conversations. That first step often is asking young people what issues they're seeing in their school or community, and then kind of challenging them to address those at whatever level they're at. And, it's often about persistence, I find, and that, in the past, maybe no one has asked them to think of themselves as a change maker or to kind of challenge them to take action. So you may need to come back 5 times, 10 times, but when you plant that seed, eventually when you ask them how they want to address these issues, eventually they're going to come back and they might have an idea. And very probably that idea might not be very workable at first. And I think one of the advice I give to people that are trying to spark journeys is to really try to help the students work that out by themselves and just be a really good listener and kind of say like, okay, I want to support you and let's go try whatever that idea is. And even if it fails, to help them to kind of move forward with whatever the next iteration of that idea is and try to help support that too until they get to something that's really either creating the impact they want to create or whatever it is they're trying to address. Some more comments from the chat, and please feel free to jump in if anyone has another comment. Be a changemaker yourself as an example, absolutely. Design a life project, including their dreams and strengths. Yes, I love kind of focusing in on what the passions are of young people and then trying to connect that to issues that they come up with. I had a student last semester that, you know, his passion was that he was really into basketball, but the issue he wanted to address was more interfaith dialogue between his religious community and others. And he started this program where he was doing interfaith basketball games that were peer-led by young people and getting a bunch of people to play basketball and then sitting down to have a meal and to talk about religious issues from the point of view of young people who are dealing with, you know, whatever those issues were. Build relatedness to others. I love that. Support circles. Yes, absolutely. Yes, and thank you, Jaden. Definitely offering support in whatever way they feel like they could use it, and building up that sense of competence and confidence. And like we mentioned earlier, I think it's important helping them to kind of normalize those initial fears and the confidence building aspect of change making too. Wonderful. I would love to continue this conversation and happy to offline anytime. But as we close today, I'd love to invite anyone, any of the presenters or any of the participants to share any closing thoughts before we all sign off for the day.
I just want to thank you and thank the audience that participated today, and let's continue the work.
Absolutely, and thank you so much to Christian and Manat for joining us to share their journeys. You guys are amazing facilitators and storytellers, and we really appreciate getting your input into all this as well.
And I will just add that, I'm sorry, and not to cut you off, but I'll just add that we do have a Slack channel for the exchange so people can keep chatting. And there's different channels you can join, the Let's Connect and all of that. And I also invite the presenters to share their information if there's something they'd like to share widely and for people to get in contact with them. People will be interacting with each other throughout the rest of the day and then tomorrow. But if you have any other questions or need me to connect you to someone, my email is mking@ashoka.org.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Please check out all the other amazing offerings of the Ashoka U Exchange Conference. And please keep in touch if there's anything we can help you with.